Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name is James Atkinson. Thank you for choosing to join into this week's episode. Now, in this week's episode, there is a disclaimer on this video that it didn't turn out the way that she was expecting. She's written this in the comments section. I don't really want to hate on this video in any way, shape or form. She's done a very brave thing by posting this video. Now the channel's called Bobby Hair Studio. It's called Every Stylist's Nightmare, and I can see why. I've literally only watched the first 3 minutes-ish, not even that much, of this video before I thought, oh, I just really want to talk about this and the bits that I've seen so far and sort of go through it with you guys and give you some of my thoughts and feelings on this particular video. So if you like this kind of content, then subscribe. If you like tutorial style content, then subscribe, because there's there's nearly 400 videos on the channel. So lots and lots to go through.
Last night's color correction did not go to plan, and I heavily debated even making this video because I know there's going to be people in the comments saying, I don't know what I'm doing, I ruined her hair, I destroyed her hair, and honestly, yeah, I'll take credit for some of that for sure.
Now, big props for making this video. I said that in the intro. Big props for making this video. Big props for that intro. Making mistakes and highlighting your mistakes requires an enormous amount of self-belief and a very, very small ego. So, yeah, I think it's really, really important. I've made videos where I've made mistakes in the past. And I'm not saying that, that makes me a hero. It doesn't. It's just I know that other people have made the same mistakes, and so therefore, I'd like to share those mistakes with other people so other people don't feel quite so bad when they make those mistakes.
Sure. However, sometimes in your chair, unexpected things happen, even when you do your due diligence. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna bite the bullet, and I'm gonna take you guys through what happened to this client's hair and what we were intending to do and our process and our formulas, and then how we worked with these ends. Ew, they make me want to throw up. Spaghetti squash ends are disgusting. You never want to see this in your chair. This is a chemical reaction. This is not over-processed bleach. This is something else. And we had to do so much to try to salvage her hair and work with it. So this is our consultation right here. We kind of grabbed a test strand to kind of hold it out horizontally so we could really see where things were. She has a few inches of her virgin root, and then there was a bit of discoloration here, and we asked her, like, is that your box dye? And she said, like, she did box dye at the end of summer, and that she saw a stylist for keratin smoothing, and that the stylist told her that her hair might lift a little bit in keratin smoothing. Spoiler alert, I don't think that was keratin smoothing, and I don't know what it was. So even though we did a test strand and it turned out fine, in the test strand, the last inch of the hair was a little frazzly, so we told her that we'd do a little trim and use K18. Here's us putting K18 into her hair. Here was the original plan, is to use 20 volume and cool additive in the sections that we do at the back, and then we were going to add 40 into the 20 to kind of make it a 25 and then make it a 30 as we move towards the front of the hair.
Adding 40 into 20, I always think if you do stuff like that, you are asking for trouble. 40 volume is obviously incredibly strong. It's there for a reason. I don't think it's there to be mixed with bleach, especially Blonde Me. I mean, Blonde Me is so powerful. If anybody saw last week's video, she used 7 vol on a client and lifted it to a level 10, and I appreciate it was quite a few shades lighter. It's always best it's always best to do 2 things: mix fresh bleach and use the volume that you require. Putting 12 into 6 that we used, it gets it. I'm not to say this was the cause. I mean, there's clearly something in the hair. You can see it visually. You can see it in that consultation. I mean, well done to them for filming every step of this. I think it was like a video that they were filming every aspect of it. But it's never a bad thing just to film stuff, especially in today's culture of people you know, not being happy with the hair and suing hairdressers and all those kind of things. You know, at least they've documented the whole process here, and I think that's very important sometimes to ensure that, you know, you've got some backup.
So the plan was to do a platinum card and get her to a milk tea blonde or a light cool brown. That was the original intention, and I'll show you where we ended up getting to. Obviously, I'm going to include the results in this, but this is how we started the hair. We started sectioning it. We had the same bowls mixed, and we decided to take the back at the same time. So this is why today's service really dumbfounded us, because it was the exact same procedure happening on either side, and one side super fried. So it was my side, and I'm going to show you what happened. Something I want to note here is my client did not lie about her consultation. I'm not about client shaming here. My client didn't lie to me knowing she had something like a relaxer in her hair. She got it confused because, of course, the titles of these two services are very confusing. One's called keratin straightening, one is called keratin smoothing. And unless you know what's in there and you've done it personally, it's hard to know as a client which one is actually a relaxer and which one is a smoother. And
that is such a good point, isn't it? That is such a good point. I've mentioned stuff like this so many times about naming things, you know, especially services that are the same as another thing. For example, I mean, this is two separate services. Smoothing and straightening are different, obviously, but, you know, when we're doing, you know, balayages and baby lights and all these kind of tech terms, you know, I'm not, you know, we can't create an industry standard. It's impossible, right? But, you know, when we are consulting with our clients, like a classic one that I've come across so many times is when someone sits in my chair, they're naturally level 6 or darker, and they've got blonde hair, and they say to me, yes, my stylist before told me they didn't use bleach. And I'm like, well, what did they use then? Because they're blonde, you know, they've got 6 levels of lift. They're really light. And I'm like, why would the because, and then they say, I don't want bleach in my hair. I've never had it. Why did that stylist tell them they weren't using bleach? And if they weren't, what product were they using? Because I've never seen a high lift tint capable of 6 levels of lift. You know, it's like when people say, well, my hairdresser doesn't use a toner, and they've got some caramel colour going on. Well, yes, that could be one specific colour, but it doesn't mean I can recreate that because I don't have that specific product. And then you're on the back foot. So it would be great if the clients understood more, because it's great to educate a client. So you've got this great product, it's only by Schwarzkopf, or it's only by L'Oreal, it's only by Joico, it's only by, you know, whoever, Redken, right? And you say to yourself, and it's only within this range, and it's really unique and interesting. Then the client's like, oh, well, I've got a unique and interesting product on their hair. And then they don't expect other stylists to necessarily carry that, because, you know, you do get that kind of thing. But that is a really, really interesting point. Now, another quick thing that I wanted to mention was the technique they're using. If anybody saw last week's video, where it was the kind of grey hair conversion video, she did the platinum card technique, but she did it very, very differently. A lot less foil. These guys are still caking on the product. They're still laying it on super thick. But she obviously just laid the product on top of each other, which is far faster, by the way, than putting a foil in, folding it over, and you're using a lot less foil. So in the long run, that's better for your pocket if you're buying the foil, but if someone's buying the foil, so that's better for your boss as well. It's better for the speed, and it also means you're throwing away less aluminium foil, which is only a good thing in this world of trying to not fill our landfill full of all sorts of things that are unnecessary. So that's another thing that I just wanted to mention there. Let's see how they get on.
Told us when she was in the sink, oh yeah, I got keratin smoothing done so that my hair is straight when I come out of the shower. That is a relaxer. It is not a smoother. So this is the point when I felt like my foils were getting too hot. So I go over to Javier's side and I touch them, and they felt warm. They felt totally normally warm. And this was dumbfounding me. I was quite concerned. So I opened up a foil that I put in pretty recently, 2 to 3 foils before, and I opened up one of hers from 8 or 9 foils before, and they were the same color. They had lifted to the same level, and mine were expanding and coming out the sides of my foils. We allowed it to stay kind of open fold so that the heat could escape but mine were expanding out the side of the foils and hers were not. Hers were doing totally fine. So I was thinking, okay, mine's just gonna process kind of fast, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put in the rest of the foils, and then I'm going to scrape out the bleach on my side, and Javier's will catch up any moment now. I was just thinking that, okay, this is a little bit of the box dye getting a little bit hot, but mine was getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So every couple of foils, I was like checking and touching, and I was like, this is getting to be very concerning.
I've had this happen before, on quite a few occasions actually. Various things can interact with the hair, different types of metals that have been sprayed onto the hair, not necessarily on purpose. Sometimes this can happen in the sense that one of the most interesting things that I ever came across, and it wasn't actually doing this person's hair, but I diagnosed the problem eventually. This client had come in, had a bleach job done, the foils had got so hot, expanded, blah, blah, blah. She had been in her shower spraying chemicals to clean her shower above her head. And obviously the residue had rained down on her hair and actually interacted with, she'd washed her hair before, she'd got out of the shower, she'd obviously dried those chemicals into her hair. A couple of days later, she gets her hair done, and then this one particular side swelled up and caused an enormous amount of damage to her hair because of the interaction with the chemicals. Obviously, that could be the case here, because if one side's not reacting and they're applying the same amount of products to both sides, and one is getting an adverse reaction and the other one isn't, then that could be the case here, by the way. This is very reminiscent of what I saw and experienced.
So it was only my side that got this hot. It was so confusing. So my theory is that when she got her permanent straightening service done, which we were told it was a smoothing service done, that was temporary, but this is a permanent straightening from what I'm seeing. When she got that done, her stylist started on the corner that I started at, and it was probably left on there for a lot longer than it should have been, because this corner was the only corner that was this heavily compromised. So there's two decisions you can make when this kind of situation happens to you. Either you stop the service, you wash out her hair, and you color back down the back, or you can keep going. And so what we decided to do was adapt and keep going. So I put a back bib on her hair, not her hair, her back, and I pulled out that back corner. I squeegeed off with my fingers as much lightener as I could into the garbage, and I just put regular 20 volume back onto the hair in areas that it was still feeling okay, so it could keep lifting, and essentially remove the insulation from the equation here, because I was like, okay, the insulation's just making it hotter than it should be, which normally doesn't happen, but I'm just trying to figure out what to do here at this point as a hairdresser, because at this point I still didn't know that she had keratin straightening. I thought this was the box dye reacting, and sometimes it gets a little hot for a couple minutes, and then you open up the foils and it releases a little heat and it goes back to normal, or you take out the foils and things are okay. But we did tell our client, hey, you're gonna need a bit of a cut because some of these ends are not happy right now, they are not doing very great. And she's like, that's fine, that's totally okay, I understand. So at this point, our thoughts were to keep going and put on the front, make sure that it catches up to a point where it's still okay and feeling healthy. But
that's a great point that she made there. If you are ever in a situation where it is going wrong, to hell on a handcart, be honest. Just tell them what is happening. It's so much easier than pretending like everything's going to plan. Honestly, every time a coconut, as a young stylist, where something was going wrong and I wasn't honest, and they get back to the basin and it's a surprise, it's a drama. However, if you just tell them along the way, they will just go with the process, because you're explaining it to them. You understand that it's not going to plan, they understand it's not going to plan, and they want you to help them reciprocally. I think the trick is to make it a two-way process rather than all the responsibility is on you.
But to rinse out the front a little sooner and work with a cut. Little did we know exactly how much damage had happened to the cortex of the hair so high up. So we were in the bowl and we were having a discussion with our client about what had happened and what our options were. And originally we had wanted to do the platinum card and then go back in and do the roots. But because of this happening, it just freaked us out so much. And we're like, maybe we should just do a fill and a toner, and then we do a root melt with toners, because these ends are freaking me out so much that I just don't want to add any more bleach to this scenario. I really don't want to do that. So our client said yes, we could do that. And basically what we did was we applied a toner to this, and it was 7-42 and 846, which is a mix of beige, chocolate, and cool tones to kind of fill the hair back in and balance it out. We also applied every single healing mask that we had in the salon to this hair multiple times over.
At that point, no healing mask on this planet will save that hair condition. Might make it feel a bit smoother momentarily, but the damage is already done, unfortunately. So if you're watching this and you're not a hairdresser, that kind of level of damage, when you get into the cortex of the hair and it starts to break down, there is no return, there is no winding the clock back. There is actually no way to physically repair hair permanently. You can temporarily repair hair, even Olaplex and all those K-teen, right? They add bonds in, but those bonds are not permanent bonds. They dissolve with water. Hence why they recommend you use the take-home steps to top it up afterwards. So it's really, really important to remember that, guys. It's not a cure. It's a patch.
Then we got to the cutting after we got out of the sink, and this is what the nasty ends look like when they're cut off. It's just melted spaghetti noodles. It's so gross. This is what that initial toner looked like when we put it on the hair, and we're just cutting everything out. And then what we did afterwards was put on a root melt and then a really ashy color onto any of those areas that needed it up at the roots. And then we put on another toner throughout everything else. Look at what happened here. There was like the bleach water melting out of the foils here. And then that's what the little bleach spatters on the mat were. Those are the ends of her hair. It's gooey, it's compromised. This doesn't feel like regular bleach over processing. This feels different. And the way I can describe it is like spaghetti squash and gummy overcooked noodles.
It's funny, the amount of clothes that I've ruined as a hairdresser, I saw the bleach on her shoe, made me think of this. When you're in a situation where it's not quite going to plan and you're running out of time, because time constraints are always a problem, and you're like manipulating and bending and twisting. We do so much of that as hairdressers, way more than we're ever given credit for, to make a beautiful outcome. Because, you know, we're pivoting and turning and things don't necessarily go the way we thought we were going to, because it's not a pure science. Things don't go the same way 100% of the time. Things only go the same way, you know, over and over again in certain circumstances. So, and when you're in those sort of, we're going to call it a panic situation, but when you're like up against it, yeah, when the pressure's on, you will all know that the amount of bleach clothes you will have owned, because you're just not thinking about you. You are like all into that, fixing that problem. It's like, it's happened to me. I have ruined thousands of pounds worth of clothes. It's ridiculous.
So the root tap is 716 and 5-4, and then we put a 4-13 onto that as well. And then for the rest of the hair, we put in a 7-56 and nougat and a little tiny bit of 5-4 to kind of even everything out, because these ends were still crazy orange. The top had lifted beautifully, but it was like too light and it was taking on to ash tones. So we really pulled everything we could out of the book to do treatments and toners and try to fill in her hair. Like, look at the toner bottles that we used on her. This was just for her.
This is the other thing as well. When you get into these situations, I would say that 99% of the time, you don't end up charging anywhere near enough for the service, because, you know, the client's expectation is that it's like, well, you know, this is almost your problem to deal with. That's kind of how you feel. I don't know if you all feel like that. Sometimes I feel like that. You know, when you take something on, they expect you to be a mind reader before you even started, and you use 5 or 6 tubes of colour extra over and above that you would have done normally, that you even accounted for. And that you can end up doing these at a loss. And I think to myself as a hairdresser over the years, the amount of colour work I've probably done at a loss, never even mind break even, at a loss, once you've factored in my wage and the time and the lighting and the heating and the all in that slither of time that you spent with that client, it would have been done at a loss. And I think that's something that we don't think about too much, and it's very hard to communicate that to the client at that time, because they're just panicking about their hair. It's not what they expected, it's not what they wanted, and they've got to pay extra for it, and it becomes a really big drama in your head as a stylist. So you don't feel like you can charge them all the toner that you used and all of the bleach that you used and all of we might charge them what we quoted them, but that's probably not covering it right now. So it's a very tricky one. I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate that.
And overall, we were able to blend her root as much as possible. You're still gonna see that the front sides are a different color than the back, because the back just wouldn't take that. You can see a clear line down the center of this area where the front is healthier than the back was. We blow dried her hair, we gave her a good cut, we put in like 50 treatments. Again, I can't preface about how many treatments we put into her hair to try to revitalize it. Some people's hair feels worse when it's wet, and it feels a little better when it's dry. She is one of those people. But, she took home some products to take care of her hair, and we told her if she wanted to come back and cut more off, we'd be happy to do that. But we decided to leave her hair as long as we possibly could, because she wasn't ready to lose all that length. We gave her a blow dry. Her hair looks really good at the front. It's a little bit more of a warmer brown. She was happy with the color. She was actually really happy with the color. And even though I see problems and inconsistencies in the color, this is something that's going to just take a little bit more work. In a couple months, she'll come back. We'll refresh her toner, do more treatments. She's going to do treatments at home, and hopefully not use high heat on her hair. That was another thing that we told her not to do, even though she said she wanted to do it. But essentially, the care comes up to her at home, and then making sure that she books appointments just to get toner refreshes and treatments after this, because there's not much else that we can do other than to leave the hair alone. If this ever happens to you, don't beat yourself up.
I love the little caption she wrote at the end there on the screen. Really, yeah, perfect. I mean, like I said, she's done a phenomenal job. And actually the colours, okay. It's not the end of the world. Like she said, she's looking at the indiscrepancies. I don't think the client would see those indiscrepancies in the hair. And this is what I was saying previously in another video, when we as hairdressers look at a colour, we're looking at it through the eyes of a perfectionist. Yes, there's a demarcation front to back, and yes, it's different front to back because of the porosity. The porosity will spit out the colour, and that will cause problems. But ultimately, that looks okay. Let's get realistic. That is actually not a bad result overall. And I think to myself, in that situation, the client's happy. The hair is, yes, cut, but looking, okay-ish. And if she does all of the things that, that this stylist is suggesting, then, she won't amplify that damage. And it's going to take an enormous amount of time. And that's one of the things that I stress to people when we're talking about in consultations, and I'm a bit concerned about this hair's years old down here, years and years, right? So if they want to keep that hair years and years old, then they've really got to be, mindful of the condition, mindful of the things that they do to their hair over a long period of time. Anything past here, that hair has seen some stuff, like that is a really old hair. When it's that long and it's kind of right down to the waist, that hair has seen some, that's been on her head since she was probably quite young. She doesn't look very old, so she would have been in her probably early teens when that hair grew down there. So you've got to remember that, and I think that's something that people just take their hair for granted. It just grows and grows and grows, but it is a slow process, and it does need to be done with care and all of those things at home as well. She wanted to use high heat because obviously she's got curly hair. She wants to string it out, etc. But you can't always press upon clients that you know, it really will go horribly wrong if you don't follow this particular pathway. And so I'm really brutally honest with my clients when I say stuff. And it doesn't always land well initially because they're just like horrified by the level of honesty. But in the long run, it always plays out in the way that I said it was going to. So they do eventually realize that you know what you're talking about, and they're okay with it. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. What a fantastic video Bobby has made here. Don't forget to go and check out her channel. She's on 47,100 subscribers, so go and give her some love. Bobby Hair Studio. But I really appreciate the fact that you made this video, Bobby. So if you're watching it, big kudos to you. Thank you for your time, effort, and energy for making these videos, because I know better than most that these videos take a lot of time, energy, and effort to produce. I'll see you again next Sunday for another episode of Life Fair.